33, Yo 31, the Grumpy Thelemite here. Today we're going to be reacting to a couple of video performances of Aleister Crowley's ritual called the Star Ruby, also known as Liber XXV. So first of all, we're going to read through it. It's a very brief ritual, especially when you just read straight through it. And then we will watch two different videos by two different Thelemic practitioners and kind of react to them. And hopefully along the way, we'll have some things to talk about in terms of ritual performance and to help better understand the ritual and generally how Thelemites do rituals. Before we get into that, I should mention that Thelemic Union has a whole online course devoted to starting your magical practice. So if you don't have a daily magical practice, or if you'd like some kind of structure, we have a 120-day program to start a full Thelemic magical daily practice. A link for that will be put into the description below. And we also have a separate course specifically dealing with the Star Ruby. So today in this video, I won't be talking about much of the meaning or symbolism of this ritual, of which there is a lot. So if you want to learn about that and the details of performing this ritual, check out our online course on the Star Ruby, which will be in a link in the description. If you really are an advanced student and you want to really do a deep dive into the symbolism, we have yet another course about the Eightfold Key of Thelemic Magic, which gets into Crowley's I Ching attributions and finding out some deeper symbolism that those I Ching attributions unlock, specifically for the rituals of the Star Ruby and Star Sapphire, as well as some other rituals. So if you're interested in any of those courses, please check them out in the links below in the description. So let's get started. The text of the Star Ruby can be found in many books and online. You can find it on thelemic.com/liber-xxv. I'll also put a link in the description if you would like to read along or save the text for yourself. So first of all, it's Liber XXV, the Star Ruby, Liber 25, which is 5 times 5. It's a pentagram ritual. The pentagram has 5 points, and so that is a reason why it's attributed to 25. Originally, it was found in chapter 25 of the Book of Lies, and we'll actually be reading from a version that was updated in Magic and Theory and Practice. So some of the attributions are a little different, some of the names are a little different. This is kind of the standard Thelemic updated version that Crowley did. Star Ruby is generally meant as a banishing ritual, although it involves elements of invocation. So that's really just a very brief rundown of its purpose. Again, if you want to learn more about it, we have a whole course on the Star Ruby, and I encourage you to check it out. So it's a publication in Class D, which means it's an official ritual of AA, and anyone can perform this. Generally, it's seen as a little bit more advanced than, say, a lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. So that's why I recommend trying out our course on starting a daily magical practice, and you can work your way up to using the Star Ruby. Of course, you could just jump right in and do it. The best way to learn is by trying and experiencing it for yourself. So here's the ritual. Facing east in the center, which is the center of your circle, draw deep, deep, deep thy breath, closing thy mouth with thy right forefinger pressed against thy lower lip. So you're in kind of the attitude of Harpocrates or Horpacrot, the sign of silence. Then dashing down the hand with a great sweep back and out, expelling forcibly thy breath, cry apopantos kakadaimenos, which basically means away evil spirits. It's kind of an exorcism that begins this ritual. With the same forefinger, touch thy forehead and say soi, which is this ritual is largely done in Greek, which is different from the Hebrew of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Soi means I am. So then you touch thy member, which is your genitals, and say o phale. The secret sense of these words is to be sought in the numeration thereof. Just to cut that short, the phrase o phale in Greek is the enumeration of the words phallus plus kates. So ophale refers not just to the male phallic member, but the conjunction of male and female, the lingam yoni, so to speak. Or in other words, it's the creative power in general. So you are saying soi o fale, and then you touch your right shoulder with your forefinger, say iskaros, touch your left shoulder, say eucharistos, then clasp thine hands, locking the fingers, and cry iao. Iskaros means power, eucharistos means thanksgiving or gratitude, and iao is a sacred name. You then advance to the east of your circle, and you imagine strongly a pentagram aright in thy forehead. So you imagine the full pentagram point up in your forehead. Then you draw your hands to your eyes, fling the pentagram forth, making the sign of Horus, the sign of the emperor, and roar Therion. Retire your hand in the sign of Huirparkrat, so you come back to the sign of silence. You then go around to the north and repeat this process, so flinging out the pentagram in that direction, but say Nuit. You then go around to the west and repeat, but whisper Babylon. Go around to the south and repeat, but bellow Hadit. Completing the circle Widdershins, which is counterclockwise, retire to the center and raise thy voice in Payan with the words Iopan and the signs of Nox, N-O-X. So there's the signs of LVX, and then Crowley created these signs of NOX. The Nox signs represent crossing the abyss. So that's another reason why this ritual is generally considered a little more advanced. You are kind of pantomiming or ritually enacting the crossing of the abyss at this part where you're invoking Pan and doing the signs of Nox. Once you're done with that, you extend your arms in the form of a tau, so in the form of a cross, at the center of your circle, and say low but clear, promui iunges, opico mu teletarkai, epidexia sunoques, eparistera daimones, flege garpere mu ho aster ton pente, kaientistele ho aster ton hex esteke. So this is a lot of Greek, which means in front of me are iunges, behind me are the teletarkai, on my right are the sunoques, on my left are the daimonos. Around me flames the star of 5, or the pentagram, and in the column shines the star of 6, or the hexagram. So it's almost identical to the words of the lesser ritual of the pentagram, but in Greek, using, instead of the archangels, these ideas that come from the Chaldean oracles. And then you basically say the pentagrams are around me, and in the column shines the 6-rayed star, essentially. At the end, you repeat the cross Kabbalistic as above and end as thou didst begin. So basically, you repeat Soe, Ophale, Iskaros, Eucharistos, Iao. And many people interpret this end as thou didst begin as ending with the Apopanto Kakadaimonos, just as you began. So for our first video that we're reacting to, we have Sab Chimera doing a performance of the star Ruby. And I'll just be stopping it along the way to make some comments. So you can already see that goes kind of from the sign of silence in a way to swinging the arm out and doing Apopantos Kakadaimonos, the kind of exorcism. You see how fast it is. It doesn't take a few minutes, it just takes a second or two. And already they're into the kind of star ruby Kabbalistic cross. Sounds like they said Kyrios instead of Iskaros. I'm not sure about that switch there. But you'll find that Thelemites often do not stick to the script for much of anything. So of course it's recommended to learn the ritual as it's written first, but of course Crowley himself recommends that your own crude rituals are going to be better than the polished rituals of other people. So if you want to change out this or that, or experiment with this or that by switching things out, that's obviously totally okay. In the end, people come to kind of create their own version of each ritual that they're doing. So again, a kind of personal touch. Doing the kind of triangle on the forehead is not necessarily needed, but for some people that might work better for them. For other people, it might kind of distract them from visualizing that pentagram that you then fling out with the sign of the Emperor. And you can hear they roar Therion and then come back to the sign of silence. To then drawing the circle, Widdershins, and doing the next part. So they just very softly say Nuit there. So you can see it's a whisper of Babylon. Each one of these in the four quarters has a different way of saying it. So you roar in the east, and then you say Nuit, you whisper Babylon, and you bellow Hadit. This actually has to do with the four elements, the four cherubs. So, for example, you're roaring Therion because it's a lion. You're saying Nuit because it's Aquarius, the person, the human being. You whisper Babylon because it's the eagle of water. And you bellow Hadit because it's the bull of earth. Here comes the bellow.
Hadit!
And completes the circle.
Yo pan, yo pan pan, yo pan.
So this is the paean where you're basically singing an invocation to Pan. This person goes through the Nox signs one by one, basically going up the tree. So each of these signs is attributed to a different grade. And symbolically, by doing each one, you're kind of moving up the tree of life corresponding to that grade. The way they sing the Io Pan is very personal. So you don't necessarily have to say Io, Io, Io. You could be saying Io Pan each time. You could just have one Io Pan, theoretically. It's up to you to kind of figure out what makes the most sense and what feels right. A lot of ritual is not just a science, but an art. So you have to find things that feel right to you and are aesthetically pleasing to you, because it is a dramatic ritual, and you want the drama to be compelling for yourself, at least. And especially when you're performing for other people, you want that to kind of bring people into the ritual, not send them. You want people to be in the zone, and not take them out of that kind of magical space. So if you suddenly start shrieking or doing something weird, that will take people out of the moment. So you notice it's nothing too fancy. They're actually just kind of saying the words when they're in the sign of the cross. And really not much more is needed. You don't need to vibrate every single word. You don't need to sing or extend every word to make it super long. Of course you could, but that's not necessary.
Soy yo feliz, curios, Eucharistos. Apopantos Cacodaminos.
And they end as they did begin, with the Apopantos Cacodaimenos. Some people view that as not necessary at the end, but for symmetry's sake, a lot of people, I think, do that at the end as well as the beginning. Can also comment that this is being done in kind of a typical Gnostic Mass temple, but it could be done anywhere. They're wearing just kind of a generic brown robe, and you could wear, black robe, white robe, no robe, street clothes, whatever. There's really no prescription for a specific type of clothing. That often would depend on if there's a greater purpose to the ritual, and Star Ruby was a part of it. So, for example, if you were going to invoke Mars and you had Star Ruby at the beginning as the banishing portion, you might wear a scarlet or red robe. But in general, there's no special implements here. They don't have a fancy wand or staff or lance or anything like that. It's just the forefinger. And you can do this at any time. This person took approximately 2 minutes to get through beginning to end. And I would say they didn't really rush it. It is a little bit of a quicker performance, but it just goes to show that it can be pretty quick and still be effective. So I will put a link in the description to this video so you can check it out yourself and watch it yourself if you'd like to. So this next video performance of the Star Ruby is done by Frater Oz, whom a lot of you probably know. He's got a YouTube channel here on YouTube, and I'll put a link to his channel and to this video so you can go check out the rest of his work. We'll see how he does the ritual and if there's any differences from the previous one. So first of all, you can already see they're in a plain white robe, and he just has his forefinger that he's using. He also is in a Gnostic mass temple. You can see the tomb behind him, but again, you don't have to be in any particular temple or setting to do this ritual.
Από πάντως κακοδαίμονος!
So you can see this is a kind of more slow, deliberate version of the Star Ruby's Kabbalistic cross. He's doing one large breath for every single word. So that's one way to kind of focus on every word, maybe do some visualizations while you're vibrating these words. But you don't necessarily need to do that. You could theoretically do the entire Kabbalistic cross of this ritual in a single long breath, or 2 breaths, or something like that. But it just goes to show there's minor differences that can change a lot in a ritual. He also changes the pitch from one word to the other. A lot of people have kind of a higher pitch for the soi and then a lower pitch for the ofale, representing the descent of the light into the generative power. But of course, there is no set pitch for any of these words. You can go up or down as it seems right for you. Whatever makes the ritual seem more intense, stronger, that's generally going to be better for you. It's a nice roar by Frater Oz. You can see that he takes a few breaths and kind of works his way up to the sign of the Enter. If you want to take the time to visualize the entire pentagram at this point in the ritual, so if you have it kind of cloudy or if you're not fully visualizing it, you can take those extra few breaths or extra few seconds to really make that a clear visualization. And the way he does that kind of sign of the Enter with his hands just at his forehead, and then shooting out from there, that's a little more typical than the previous individual you watched. So you can see he just has his hands just kind of resting at his forehead, waiting to shoot out in the sign of the Emperor.
Therion!
just want to point out again, the pacing of this is much slower than the previous one. Doesn't mean it's better or worse. I think you may find that you have a personal preference for one or the other, but both of these performances are correct. There are a little technical issues with each of them that don't follow the script exactly, but still, the pacing of this is much slower. He takes a minute in a sign of silence to just kind of relax back from that sign of the Emperor, and then turns for the next portion of the ritual. And you can see in this one, he just kind of walks over to the next quarter. It is pretty typical for people to stick their forefinger out and kind of trace the circle. So you trace a quarter of the circle at each quarter until you come all the way back around. I believe we saw the last performance do that. But simply going over to the other quarter is, I think, perfectly acceptable here. Just another little difference to point out.
Nuit.
So he says Nuit there. It's the same build-up, even though there isn't a big roar at the end. He just says Nuit, which is correct. It's very balanced. So he takes about the same amount of time in this quarter as in the previous one, even though he was doing a big roar in the first quarter and simply saying it in this quarter. It's one thing that's generally good is balance and symmetry. So if you take a long time in one quarter, you probably want to take about the same amount of time in the other quarters, just for the sake of balance. A lot of people think of banishing in general as kind of evening out or balancing out the elements, not necessarily creating a massive vacuum of banishing all the elements. And the magician's virtue, it's a virtue in general for magicians to be balanced. So that should be reflected aesthetically in the ritual and in the way you're doing it. So I think it is definitely a good thing that he is taking his time in each quarter and not rushing through it just because you're kind of saying it with less force. And each quarter will hopefully going to have that balance in the performance. Whispering Babylon, taking about the same amount of time. Now he goes to the final quarter.
Hadith!
So people, interpret the word bellow in different ways, but obviously each quarter is said or done in a different way. They should be distinct. Now he comes back to the center again.
Eopan, 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 pan, pan. 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 Eopan, Eopan, Eopan.
So this is obviously a very different way of doing the paean. Just demonstrates there are very distinct ways of doing this that are still exactly correct according to the script of the ritual. So in the first one, we had an Eo or an Eopan for each sign. And the signs were moved through pretty quickly. In this one, he does a whole Eopan, 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 pan for each sign. And he actually changes the way he sings it for each sign. So some of them are more subdued, some are more triumphant. And then this final one, where you're basically pinching the nipple and cradling a baby in your arms, the minor triumphants sign. it's almost like he's singing a lullaby to that child, right? So the tone, the force that he does with each Iopan is different according to the sign and the nature of the sign. So obviously you need a lot of study to understand the nature of those signs, what they represent, who they're representing, what place on the tree of life they're representing, what part of the process of crossing the abyss they represent, and all that should be theoretically reflected in the way in which you perform the ritual, the different aesthetic qualities of each of these signs in the way you perform them.
Pro mu jungus, opiso mutelitarche, epidexia sinocis, epiristera daimonos, flegegar perimu esterton pente, kai ente stele o esterton existeke.
So he has kind of a more forceful, this portion of the ritual is done in a more forceful way than the previous one. The pronunciation is a little different from the previous one and from other people I've seen or you might see. I don't think getting the pronunciation exactly right according to this or that form of Greek is really that important. What is important is you get close to it and you understand what it is that you are saying. So the meaning behind it, the intention behind it is important. Being exactly perfect according to ancient Greek pronunciation is probably not going to happen for a lot of people, and I don't think the gods will turn the other way just because you say a Greek word a little weird. Of course, it's admirable to want to be accurate, and technical accuracy I think is a part of good ritual performance. But people definitely obsess on these little details, and someone might say, "Oh, this entire ritual is bad because they didn't pronounce this one word correctly." I don't think it's as important as a lot of people make it out to be. Again, the meaning of what you're doing is primary, and accuracy is important, but it's not going to leave you unbanished. It's going about the same speed as before. Nice close up.
Apopantos kakodaimonos.
So he also finishes with Apopantos Kakadaimonos. That final Kabbalistic cross, a lot of people kind of rush through it because of all the energy raised during the process of doing the ritual. So they kind of just speed through the final Kabbalistic cross, which I think is it's not irreparably damaging your ritual. But again, you have to understand that one of the basics, aside from technical accuracy, is balance and symmetry. So if you go a certain pace at the beginning of your ritual, I think generally, aesthetically speaking, at the very least, if not magically speaking, having that balance in terms of the speed and rhythm and tone is important. And I think he matched them up very well. So that's it. That's the reaction to these two different star rubies. Hopefully you learned a little bit about performing the ritual, how it might be done best. Again, we have a few online classes that are relevant to this ritual. First of all, our 120-day learning a basic daily magical practice in the Thelemic tradition. That's a very important course for people that are especially starting out or want some kind of structure to start out. We also have a course specifically on the Star Ruby where we go in depth into what all these words mean and why, and the symbolism of it. And we also have, for much more advanced students, something called the Eightfold Key of Thelemic Magic. And you can learn about Crowley's I Ching attributions and how they apply to the Star Ruby and other similar rituals. So links to all those things, as well as the videos that you just saw, will be in the description. Hopefully this was helpful to you. And good luck with your magical practice. 93.